I want to just quickly start with this session and give you some numbers which I think are mind-blowing and explain why Forbes magazine last year called Groupon the fastest growing company in history ever. And I want to give you the numbers and read them slowly so that we all understand the magnitude of this fast growth, which is 2 million subscribers in 2009, 51 million in 2010. One country in 2009, the US, 35 countries in 2010, and 5 more since the beginning of 2011. From the US to Brazil, Germany, France, and the UK to Japan, from Russia to Japan and Australia. 30 cities in 2009, thousands of cities globally now. 120 employees in 2009, more than 4,000 today. Groupon ran 3,000 deals in 2009 and over 100,000 until today. More than 650 deals per day around the globe, $1.5 billion in savings for consumers, more than 32 million Groupons, that's the name for the vouchers, purchased worldwide, 32 million. And Groupon is profitable. And with that, I would like to ask Kara to introduce Dennis and wish you a very exciting session. I think this is the most interesting session when it comes to local, internet, mobile, e-commerce at this year's DLD and probably at this time. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I told Mark if he did too much of a commercial, I would start to mock him. But I also want to say, besides this incredible phenomena sitting to my right, Dennis also has a company you might have heard of called Foursquare, which is also quite a phenomena across the globe and has grown rather significantly in a very short amount of time. Dennis has started a company called Dodgeball. Initially that he sold to Google for a large sum of money, and then he turned around and started essentially the same company, which someday we hope that he'll sell back to Google again. And he's going to make a career out of doing this, selling the same company to Google over and over again. So that's why I think he's a genius myself. So anyway, this is a really important session because these are two, besides the fact, Aaron's since gotten a haircut, but I used to say, I'm not sure which one has the best Justin Bieber haircut in the internet. I like that haircut. I'm a believer. These are two very exciting startups because, for one, to start with, a lot of startups, I see them all come and I've seen them go. I sound like a really old, cranky lady who throws people off their lawn. But you see a lot of bullshit startups happen. And in a lot of cases, there's almost nothing there. And in this case, these companies have sort of come out of nowhere, grown rather quickly, and are actually establishing really massive businesses, or at least massive phenomena, right away and quickly, and in a way that's really significant. So we're going to talk about the companies themselves and sort of the startup scene. Obviously, both of them have been in the news for massive fundings that they've had recently. Andrew they released a statement, their press release, because Groupon's got a very whimsical, how would you call it, Andrew? The tone of Groupon is what?
I'd call it very whimsical.
Whimsical, okay, good. He said, we've raised like $1 billion, which was somewhat amusing, except when everyone else...
It was funnier in the press release.
Yeah, it was in the press release. So let's start talking about the phenomena of each of your companies. You guys, I don't have to go to the history, but you started what year, Dennis?
What, Foursquare?
Foursquare
was started in, we launched in March of 2009.
2009 at South by Southwest.
Yes, we'll be 2 years old in this March.
Right, exactly. And you guys launched?
In November 2008.
So very quickly that these came up. Let's talk about the ideas behind them. When you had started Dodgeball, I joke, but it's a very similar kind of service, is the concept of local, because that's, I think, the most important thing behind both of your companies. There's a lot of focus on the social elements of it, but local is really what has changed both of what you're doing, I think, personally. So I consider both of you social-ish, but more local is the most important part. Why don't you talk about the concept behind each of your companies, starting with Dennis?
Sure. So have people here used Foursquare? I always like to do this little exercise. Yeah, see, that's good. Thank you. So, a lot of the stuff that we think about with Foursquare is, how do we build things that make cities easier to use? Like, that was the original concept, and now we're on this kick of, like, how do we make the world easier to use? And that's, it's a little bit of everything. It's like, how do you make software that helps introduce you to new people? How do you make software that helps you find new places? Like, when I land in Munich for 2 days, like, Foursquare is supposed to help guide me through these 2 days, introducing me to people and places and all sorts of experiences. I think we're kind of infamous for a lot of the game dynamics that we've dropped onto Foursquare, like using game dynamics to encourage people to go out and find new restaurants and meet new people and just do things that they normally wouldn't do. And as we start to do that, we're seeing that local merchants are getting involved, taking advantage of some of the game mechanics to reward customers that are, the mayor of a pizza place, someone that's been there more than anyone else, or to reward a customer that's been to your business 10 times in the last 3 months. So, it's kind of all coming full circle. We're building these things to help people explore the world, and then local merchants are taking advantage of it, and then the game dynamics are pushing people out there to actually go and experience new things.
And with you, what you were looking at when you were doing it, because there had been these companies around. There were several attempts to create a Groupon-like company very early on in the Internet's history.
Yes. So Groupon actually started as a website called thepoint.com, which was a platform where groups of people trying to solve some shared problem could self-organize and say, I'll do something, but only if a bunch of other people do it with me. And you could use it for fundraising or a boycott or group buying. And after we kind of weren't getting anywhere, we decided we needed to figure out a way to make money, and group buying was an interesting way to do it. So we focused on local, just doing a deal a day. And I think similar...
How did you get to that? Because it was a political organizing tool. You're politically active. You were trying to get people to change things.
It wasn't just political. It was more around solving collective action problems, solving the problems where I want to do something, a bunch of other people want the same thing, and if there was a way that we could leverage our collective power, whether it's the power of action or the power of buying something, we can achieve something that none of us could do alone.
Give me an example of one of the early things that you did, the collective.
We did everything from, we want to build a local park. It's going to cost $10,000. Everybody can commit money, but you're not charged until we hit that tipping point, to let's all see if we can make Election Day a de facto national holiday, if we can get 10 million people to just skip work that day. Like some ridiculously huge, lofty ambitions, and including let's get 80 people together and we can negotiate a group discount on The Economist or at this local business. So we saw some of this group buying stuff happening, and then we started that, doing the daily deal, and I think it's very similar to what Dennis is doing, in the sense that what we think we're doing for consumers is helping them discover interesting businesses. Our approach is far more crass. It's just money, right? It's just giving people a discount. Instead of, I think that what Dennis has done by introducing a truly new behavior, badges and game mechanics and stuff like that is remarkable. It's very rare that stuff like that happens. All we're doing is just giving people stuff half off, which is a very old and familiar concept.
Right, the idea of discounting, the idea. So a lot of it's still something that's been done a lot, but it's very hard for local merchants to be found. I think both of the things you guys are doing are discovery more than anything. Now, you were doing it through, and I always make this joke with Andrew, is that, half-off stripper pole lessons, which is something I get every week from Groupon. And I have yet to avail myself to it, but someday. But you're doing it through things people want to do in the local community, spas, a lot of restaurants, a lot of spas. You're doing it through, you like something, you recommend it, you check in there. How are you guys, in a lot of ways, we wrote a story on our site that they should merge with each other because it makes perfect sense, and that the idea, but how would you look at yourself differently about the way you're approaching things?
I don't know. Do you guys see yourself more as helping business acquire new customers, or... Yeah, that's how you guys are looking at it, right? Yeah, we look at a lot of what we're doing as kind of loyalty, right? So a lot of the venues get involved with Foursquare specifically to reward the users that are coming there on a regular basis. And sometimes it's with like a free slice of pizza or discounted coffee, or sometimes it's just writing the name of the mayor up on the blackboard, which is some kind of weird form of social capital. But it's reaching out and trying to build these tools specifically for merchants so they can find their best customers and then find some way to reward them.
Right. So you're approaching it from the customer point of view of having your users discover things and then tell each other about them.
I think a lot of the discovery on Foursquare comes from users interacting with other users. People leaving tips in various places and like, okay, here are the top 10 things to do in Munich based upon my profile and what my friends have recommended.
Right.
We haven't gone there with merchants yet.
Right. So would you call yourself a social company?
Yeah, I think you said local. Like I always think that we're more social plus location, and then the local
location.
part. Yeah. It's it's like when you give users the ability to broadcast their location and then broadcast information about what's actually happening at that place. And Foursquare, a lot of people think it takes place in the present tense, which it kind of does. People check in and then they kind of put their phones away. But what's interesting is you get people to check in 3 times a day, which is about the average for a Foursquare user, and you do that over 30 days or over 6 months, and you build this great profile of the type of person that user is, like where they like to go, what do they do coffee in the morning, do they do sushi on Tuesdays, and you can use that for all sorts of interesting things.
And right now, you're just sort of, it sounds like we're just a simple little Groupon, little discounting service, but obviously, simple little discounting services don't get valued at, $4.75 billion in like 15 minutes kind of thing?
Well, I mean, I wouldn't call us a discounting service. I think what we think of ourselves not as, people call us social commerce, which I'm not sure what that means. Mm-hmm. I think, I do have an opinion on what it means, but I don't think it means Groupon. I think of us as local e-commerce, and I think that discounting is a cornerstone of local e-commerce. Otherwise, there's no purpose in buying something online that you're going to go to a store to be able to use anyway. So what I think we're going to continue to go down that path of bringing offline transactions and offline commerce online to create kind of a more efficient market for local businesses.
Why do you think that it's been such a quick uptake with your services? People have been trying to sort of crack this nut for a long time and have had various levels of success, but nothing this dramatic.
Because we cracked the nut.
Yeah, okay.
And it's a serious nut.
Okay.
Meaning it was one of the original things that people wanted to do with the internet. That's how does it transform local? And there wasn't even a good form of customer acquisition offline before the internet for local businesses.
Newspapers, local circulars.
For a mom and pop shop, the problem is if you want to advertise in a newspaper or a circular or radio, you have to spend a whole bunch of money up front, and you get exposure, which you cross your fingers will translate into leads, which will translate into customers in the door. And if you're a small business, you don't have the kind of budget to screw around and mess that up. You kind of get one shot, and so many small businesses have tried one ad. Mm-hmm. It's a terrible experience, and they never do it again. So with Groupon, it's the first time ever that I don't know why I'm doing this. It's the first time in history that local businesses have been able to pay for what really matters, which is customers in the door.
But why is that? I mean, it's not. I don't say it's not a genius concept, but why hasn't that happened? Why haven't?
I don't know, but I'll tell you, it wasn't. For what it's worth, it wasn't intuitive to us that it was going. Again, we started as the point, and when we started selling these daily deals, we looked at it more from the consumer perspective. Like It would be really cool to be able to get these discounts or to get exposed to new businesses every day. But I don't think we fully realized how vital something like this could be to small businesses in the city. So I don't know. I do think that people ask this. I do think it could have existed 10 years ago. I don't think it would have grown as quickly. But I don't see anything about the concept that it couldn't have been successful.
Right. Let's talk about the quick growth and the attention that you've gotten, both of you. I mean, I can't pick up a magazine cover without seeing one of your faces on it, which is very enjoyable, I suppose. You've gotten a huge amount of attention rather quickly. First Dennis, and now Andrew. What is that like, the idea of a startup? Before it took a startup quite a long time. There was some adoption, there was some attention, things like that. Right now, what's happened with startups has changed, especially certain startups, not every one of them, but has happened rather quickly. How do you deal with that? We'll get to the money part later, but how do you deal with that, what's happened? How do you manage that? I mean, it's good for your brand, too, because you want to get it known.
How do we manage it as a company or personally? Or,
here you are, Foursquare suddenly blew up and rather quick from a very small base to a very quick base quickly.
The toughest thing is keeping up with, what's actually going on with the companies, with people's expectation. Like, we are 50 people, and that, to me, that seems like a huge company because Dodgeball was 2 of us. But people here, I've met a lot of people that are like, what are you guys, 200, 250 people? I was like, God, I wish we were that big. And so, the amount of stuff that we can do with 50 people, I think, is great, but we talk to brands and advertisers and merchants, and, there's still a lot of friction in Foursquare to help those businesses, use the platform successfully. So that's the thing that's kind of tough, just managing expectations. With the team, it's kind of tough because there's so much exposure on us. Like in New York, we're like the it company in New York, which is great, but then, it's a little tricky to make sure that the team knows that there's a huge fight in front of us. There's lots of competition, and we have to keep our head down and keep focused to get the things built that we want to build.
What's a misconception about your company as it's gotten?
The size of the company is always the first one. The second one, it's like, oh, Foursquare, yeah, that's hipsters in New York and San Francisco, checking in at bars. And when you run the numbers,
it is a little bit hip. It is a little bit hipsters in San Francisco and New York checking in at bars. But go ahead.
I think that's how it started. I mean, Dodgeball had the same bad rap, but then we started using. We started seeing parents use it and kids on college campuses use it. And if you look at Foursquare, it's like 40% of the usage is international, like outside of the U.S. It's happening everywhere in the world. It's like not just on the coast. It's all over the U.S. It's all over Europe. We're seeing huge growth in Southeast Asia and Japan and pockets of South America. So, that was a big surprise for us, too.
And what about, you've just come out of almost, the attention and the money and everything has to do with it, but the growth has been really quick. What's been the biggest challenges for you in that regard?
Well, the growth has been quick, but it was incremental. It's not like we went from 1 to 10 overnight. So our first city, Chicago, we launched in November 2008, and then we waited a good 5 months before we went into our second city, 2 months before our third city. So we really took our time developing the original playbook and getting things right before we turned it up all the way. And that's how our international expansion has gone as well. Mark mentioned that we've added 39 countries in the last 13 months or so. And the way we did that was by creating, I think, a strong cultural foundation for the company, and then hiring great people, great entrepreneurs who are capable of executing in each one of these countries, and then just being wind against their backs, providing the playbook that they need to execute.
Let's talk about company culture also. And both of you have very strong company cultures, and it's been a big, Google originally had one of the first sort of significant company cultures. How do you look at that as an important part as you grow? Because, you're getting a lot of incoming, a lot of attention, a lot of ways that can warp that original vision. How do you each of you deal with that, with the idea? What would you say the company culture of Foursquare is?
Well, I think it's a lot of fun. First of all, we're trying to bring in people that they're not just strong engineers, but they understand how social works. Like they might be passionate about games and really passionate about local. I think one of the really interesting things about where we are at Foursquare is we basically hired a lot of our friends in New York. It's just people that we've known from the last 10 years that were either had side projects where they were reviewing local restaurants or trying to build recommendations mashups. It's all people who this is their passion. And it translates very well into the culture. I think it's also really important, going back to what you were saying before about the press coverage, is to keep the company humble. And I think, when we were growing so quickly, it's tough for employees to grasp that. But, I think it's really important just to keep everyone grounded and, as long as we all know that, we're still relatively hot, but we're 6 million users. And there's, the folks that are right above us are, considerably larger. We have a long way to go to get there.
What about, your culture is really pronounced, actually. Where does it come from? I mean, besides your own whimsical personality? Groupon, as a
business model is surprise is a big part of it. Every day we have a new deal. You don't know what it's going to be. That's part of the fun, and that's given us permission to extend that same kind of craziness or quirkiness into other elements of what we do, from our marketing to our copywriting. In department, we have 350 writers who prepare really bizarre content for
the descriptions.
These businesses. They'll talk about an acupuncture place and then talk about how you can use the needles as your fondue set after you get acupuncture. And
that is hysterical. But go ahead.
No, so I won't do another. It's hard to, but it's. So I think there's just parts of the company that keep it fun. To Dennis's point, I think that our bigger problem is, the thing that I worry about more is trying to almost manage people from getting overexcited with the success that we've had. We're only 2 years old, and we still have a long road in front of us before I feel like we can celebrate. So, like the all-hands meetings that we have are usually morbidly, talking about everything that could go wrong. It's like we almost have to beat people with a stick in order to
Do you actually beat people with sticks?
And not anymore.
Not anymore. So talk about what could go wrong then. What are you worried about at this moment? I mean, we're going to get to the financing and where you're headed, but what is your biggest worry as an entrepreneur with this kind of rocket ship of growth, both of you? First you, Andrew.
I think not becoming complacent and not being satisfied with what we've done so far and continuing to innovate. Something that I've realized after looking at a lot of the companies that have had this kind of rise and then had an equally sudden fall is that so often when they lose, they're losing to themselves more than they lose to competitors.
Well, it's a classic tale. It's a classic tale of the hero comes and then becomes corrupted and then falls and presumably returns, but we'll see. Where are you in that stage?
I think we're still growing. Things are still moving along nicely, and we just have to continue to focus on making our customers super happy, and I think we'll be okay. But I think it's about continuing to innovate, continuing to find new ways to disrupt ourselves instead of letting someone else do it.
Exactly. Well, let's talk about that idea of the attention. Both of you have turned down rather significant offers from rather large companies. In Dennis's case, Yahoo attempted to buy Foursquare. I believe Facebook also did. Who knows who else? I'm sure there were other attentive people. Obviously, your whole negotiation with Google was rather well documented, and the price was rather large, $6 billion. What happened in terms of deciding to stay independent at this moment in time? First you, Dennis.
I feel like, with some of the dodgeball experience, the thing that's important to us is taking all the ideas that we've had in our heads for a long time and building products that illustrate those ideas and then pushing them out to as many people as possible. And, I feel like we've been saying this for a while, but like we're, 10 to 20% of where the roadmap is supposed to end. And I feel like it's just too early to get off the ride. Like there's so many other things we haven't done, and there's so much opportunity with the products we're building and the data set that we're collecting that, we just want to keep pushing at it. I think the toughest part is, having confidence in our team to do that. Like when this stuff was going on last summer, we were still, like 10 or 15, maybe 20 people. And, I think it's a gamble. It's like, we're gambling that we can make it happen with the team, that we can hire the right people. And now with, 50 or 51 people, like it seems like it's paying off. Like we're starting to see the team working together. Like the hardest thing we've had to do is grow from 5 people to 50 people. Scale the company, scale the product, scale all the infrastructure, and then get everyone still playing nice together. And it feels like we just got to that point where everything's starting to work.
So how did you get to the decision? I mean, the first time you did sell, you had some regrets about it, which you talked about publicly. How did you get your investors and others to say, all right, I'm just not going to take this large return, and instead we're going to go for it?
Well, the investors have been incredibly supportive. I think they want to see us shoot for the moon, and that's great because that's what we're thinking about as well. So,
So you didn't feel like it was not the wrong decision, but you didn't feel pressure that you made a mistake.
No, I think someone told me as soon as that stuff was going down, it's like, if you turn down some of these deals, every day you'll think about it, which I think is true, but I think about it in the context of I think we did the right thing. Like we rolled the dice a little bit, we built an amazing team, and we've got plenty of runway to build all the things that we've been talking about all this time.
And how much total did you raise after what happened is after those talks, they raised a significant amount of funding?
Yeah, sure. So we did a Series A in 2009, and we did a Series B for $20 million last summer.
Last summer. Andrew, you got a ton of attention for, negative and positive for the idea of getting into these discussions with both Yahoo initially and then Google, which you aren't going to talk about in detail, I know, but I wish you would. What happened there from your perspective that you can talk about? And how in the world did you turn out about that much money?
What can you give me a few options on how you'd like me to dodge this question?
I'd like you to answer fully. Really would be really helpful for all the entrepreneurs in the audience. I know they'd like to know how someone turns down $6 billion. It's sort of like making love to a porcupine very carefully. But what were you thinking? What the hell were you thinking? That was probably the call from his mother. What the Andrew?
I can't comment on any of the speculation around any of that stuff. So, but I can say that.
But it's not speculation. But go ahead, move along.
I can say that we're local e-commerce is an exciting space, and we feel like we're onto something, and we're excited to be building our business. Okay. Isn't that an awesome thing to say as an alternative?
I just heard, you remember on Charlie Brown where the teacher's going, wah, 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 wah. That's what I just heard, like absolutely nothing. But talk a little bit more about the idea of it. I mean, the idea of what you were trying to do. I mean, when you're in a position like that as an entrepreneur, how do you balance out what's right for your employees, what's right for your investors, what's right, and make that call? And Mark Zuckerberg did the same thing. He had several different, and he's obviously made the right decision. What was the impetus for the inspiration of keeping yourself independent and moving towards an IPO? And we'll get to that in a second.
There's, I'm lucky to have great co-founders, great investors, and we talk about all kinds of decisions, and this is just not going to be a good answer. I can continue, but it's not going to be a good answer.
Right. Okay.
So I'll just stop.
All right. So where are you headed then after making this massive monetary decision for you and the rest of the generations of the Masons? What to come someday? There's some unborn child going, Jesus Christ, Andrew. Where are you going now? Are you talking to bankers about an IPO? What is the plan?
We are talking to bankers. We're learning, and we don't know what we're going to do. Mm-hmm. And that's the honest truth.
Well, I would assume so, because if you're lying in front of all these people, it would be really unfortunate.
No, but what I could be doing is we could have already had made a decision, and I'm just telling you that we haven't.
Right. How is that experience, talking to all those bankers?
It's like talking to investors for the most part, which it's pretty much the same.
And the idea of going public, why is that one of the options? I mean, one of them, you can continue to make money as a private company, continue to grow your company. Why is that on the table for you?
Well, that's what this learning process is about, but it is something that many companies eventually do.
Right.
So it seems like a reasonable thing to be on the table.
Mm-hmm.
But ultimately, to me, these types of things, even though they're juicy, I guess, for the business community, they're just so uninteresting. It's one step along the path to what's more interesting, which is where we are 5 years from now or 10 years from now.
Well, let's talk about that, where you're going. I'll let you off the hook here. But it is not just juicy. Money, sex, and power interesting to humanity. Just FYI.
I'm so glad I chose this green seat.
Mark Zuckerberg one time was like, "Why are people interested in a $15 billion valuation?" I'm like, "Are you an idiot?" Like, And of course, immediately after, like 3 really hot women came up to him, apropos of nothing, and started to pay attention to him. And I'm like, it's because of your fine looks and obvious bod. I was like, anyway. So, let's talk about where you're going. Where do you see where is Foursquare going to? It's more than a check-on. We've talked about this before on stage in interviews. Where does it move from here? Because a check-in game where everybody's a mayor is interesting and fun and exciting, but it moves to something else. What do you see it as?
I'm happy I got this question again because you asked me about the misconceptions. This is the one I forgot to mention. But everyone looks at Foursquare as like, oh, it's a check-in game. It's a game that you play around in coffee shops. And I think that's that's how we started off. And initially we thought the game dynamics might be interesting to try to get a critical mass of users, but we didn't anticipate it would kind of take on a life of its own. I think the big thing that we're going to try to prove to people in the first quarter of this year with all this stuff we're launching, all the new stuff, is that like it's just we think about the world I think differently than a lot of other folks do, which I think kind of ties into what you were trying to get out of Andrew about like why do you keep the company as opposed to handing it off to someone else. And I think we're getting all this interesting data from users, and we think about ways that we can take that data and recycle it back and give it back to the users. So I was in Munich last year using Foursquare. What has Foursquare learned about me during that time, and how can it apply it to what I did in Munich last time to make this trip a little bit more enjoyable? Mm-hmm. And we're seeing little bits of that happen in the app already. And I think that's the big opportunity, is that you can do that not just for people traveling across the Atlantic, but for people that are visiting different neighborhoods or people that are visiting different cities. And I think we generally have this opportunity to make something that can make life a little bit more interesting or push people to do things that they haven't done in the past. Like our whole kind of like academic theory is like, can you use game dynamics to help people have like better, more interesting lives? And it's like the big, strange question that we're trying to answer. And like all signs are kind of pointing to yes right now.
Now, we've talked about this before, but I don't think this crowd has heard that one of the interesting things is other third-party applications that then live on top of it. Give an example of a couple third-party, because people do still think in their minds. I mean, you did a very good job of getting the mayorship. Yeah. Are you wearing your mayor T-shirt right now?
My mayor? I don't think so. No, I got my OATV shirt.
Okay. He's
like maybe the one day I'm not wearing a Foursquare T-shirt.
Yeah, he's often wearing a mayor T-shirt. Talk about the third-party application that can be built on top of it, because the idea of getting better and better information about where you are and where to go and things like that. Yeah, so outside of the products that we've built, we've got this whole platform. It's all this infrastructure about location content. And we're starting to see all these different startups default to using our APIs because the data set's a little bit more interesting. It's not just, all the stores you'd find in the yellow pages, but it's, all the classrooms at NYU, all the parks that people hang out at. As well as like when you query something, you can say, okay, well, show me the most popular places. Show me the places that are most relevant to this user. Show me who's here right now. So we see people building everything from like social commerce apps, like, hey, where should I go to get a great deal today, to things like dating apps. Like, there's an app called Assisted Serendipity that I talk about all the time, which, it knows my 3 favorite bars in New York because of my check-in history, and it sends me an email when the girl-to-guy ratio tips at those places. So it's like, this isn't something that we designed. We just built some generic infrastructure, male, female, where are these people, what are my favorite spots, and someone built that, and it's great. And we see thousands of developers building similar apps. Right. That's an I love that as app for some reason, but although the fact of the matter is if you're someone that's not attractive to people, it doesn't matter how much it tips. But you see that happening more and more, this idea of an ecosystem, a platform that you build, that you are at the center of, that others build upon.
Yeah, that's the big thing that happened this year. Is like, 2010 was a great year for Foursquare. It's also kind of frustrating because we didn't get to build half as much stuff as we wanted to build. We just had to grow the company. We had to scale the infrastructure. But as we're fixing all this stuff and as we're making the company stronger, like the platform developed and the platform emerged. And now, we're talking to all these other startups that are starting to get a lot of attention, and they're defaulting to our API because it's one of the more interesting ones that's out there.
Okay, Andrew, let's find a question you actually can answer with some depth.
So first, before we go, is it okay if I just bitch at you about the last questions for like a couple minutes, because I was just thinking about them. Okay. So I think it's important for everybody to understand why I'm not answering these questions.
Good heavens.
Because no, it is important because
This is why I like Andrew and why it kind of annoys me, because he really cares.
Because I used to watch people doing stuff like what I just did on TV and be like, what a corporate douchebag. I'm never going to be like that. And then here I am doing it. You made me do it. So let me explain why. Let me explain why. So the first time we ever acquired a company, it was this company called Mobley. It's a development firm in the Valley. It's been really great. But I remember sitting like in the room doing the negotiation and feeling like, this is what happens when companies acquire each other. It's like, we don't know anything. Like, this could be a total disaster.
Right.
It's like, and just I imagine that happening with every other. It's a weird exploratory, like, do we love each other kind of experience, and it's very like personal between the companies, and you're exploring each other, and then everybody wants us to do that out in the open. Everybody wants like, we don't have all the answers yet. We're figuring things out.
Right.
So in the same way that
sorry to put words in your mouth. You're essentially saying we're a fucked up group of people behind the scenes, but please invest in our IPO.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I think for people who haven't, that's kind of the way these things go. I think.
Yeah. Well,
you're figuring things out, and it's just not even respectful to the other people involved to talk about it when.
Okay. So you're doing it out of respect, that you essentially continuing on this romantic theme. It's you don't kiss and tell kind of thing.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, I will. Before, we're going to get to some questions. We've got about 10 minutes for questions. But what are you, speaking of, can you tell me what you're going to become?
I can tell you what
I can ask your favorite color, I guess.
Hello.
You might tell us that.
I can tell you what we'd like to become.
What are you becoming? Because you
I think
have
what
to be
we'd
more.
like to become is the same thing that Amazon and other e-commerce companies have become for products. We want to be that for local.
Okay.
So we want to be something that people think about every time they go out to do something in their city.
So
and
they
not
have a
sure
phone.
what.
It lights up. It says, "Here's your deals of the day." Many deals.
We'll see. I mean, I think we've if we succeed, then what we're doing today is just one small part of what we will become. But I think there's an opportunity for a company to bring offline transactions and offline commerce online, and I think we're well positioned to do that. It won't be easy, but if we do it, like I want to become the kind of company that my kids can't imagine what the world would be like without.
I see.
I think everybody wants that. But
of course, not me, but what questions from the audience for these fine men? And romantic questions are fine. By the way, he's already taken. Anyway, and are you? Yes, you are too. Go ahead.
Dennis, when we walked around the museum the other day and talked a little bit about micro-local and how we're trying to share our lives in smaller and smaller spaces and more and more granularity, right? We want to talk about this room is different than what's going on in the hallway across the hallway. What are both of your services going to do to take advantage of this trend to go to the more and more micro-local?
Micro-local in terms of geography, like the floor plan of a building type of thing? Yeah,
Okay.
I don't know. I don't really think about it in that sense. I think of it as just like breadcrumbs. Like everything you do, you know, every place you go, you're kind of scattering breadcrumbs for yourself to find later. Like, what was that place that I went to? That was a lot of fun. And for my friends to find when they travel as well. You know, so I think a lot about like, you know, a lot of the Foursquare stuff started with taking this trip to Scandinavia and completely crowdsourcing the itinerary. Like, I didn't come up with any plans. I didn't have the guidebook or anything. I just let people, you know, come up with a list of things to do. And it was fantastically successful. It was a lot of fun. And I think, like, what's the easiest way to replicate that experience? And it can take place in museums or dark alleys or like, you know, graffiti on the side of a mailbox, whatever. Like, just how do you call attention to these little things that happen in kind of obscure places?
And do you imagine organizing them better? Because one of the things with Foursquare is I do read the tips when you go to a place. And, you know, you'll get 20 of the same thing. Like at one place I was like, don't eat the bloomin' onion. Don't eat the bloomin' onion. The bloomin' onion sucks. And I'm like, I better not order the fucking bloomin' onion. So, but it wasn't very organized. You know what I mean? It wasn't, it was more...
Yeah, it's one of these things, like that's one of the hard parts about growing so quickly is that, you know, you don't just have, you know, all these check-ins to babysit. You've got all these users that you have to, you know, sift through a lot of the content, merge the duplicates. Like, it gets to be a very tricky question or a very tricky problem very quickly. But, you know, it's one of the things that, when we were talking about execution, what are the things that we have to do right in order for the company to be successful? And one of those things is, you know, appropriately managing the community and building the tools that help that, you know, stuff, the good stuff, bubble to the top.
To find it. Another question?
Right here. I'm Axel Schmiegel from 7Load. I'd like to have both of you guys' opinion on Quip and Yelp, like the, you know, those models. Since we talk about local, should include that as well.
Andrew, you go ahead.
Well, reviews are a big part of what we do at Groupon. We use reviews, including sites like Quip and Yelp and others, in order largely to decide which businesses we're going to feature and we aren't going to feature. So my opinion is thumbs up.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of my friends, and I still, rely on Yelp to, for reviews and other sources. Like, we think of ways that we might be able to pull some of their content into our app. Ultimately, I think that, check-in data is more interesting than review data. You get a sense of, what a person is and the places that they go to. And I think you can use that to make smarter decisions about cities and about places than you can just reviews. It's been a theory for a long time, and we think we scratched on the surface a little bit with Dodgeball, and now I think we have enough data to prove that thesis with Foursquare.
Although I would say both of those companies do consider you competitors, because one is doing daily
Yelp copied both of us.
Yeah, what's up? All right.
The clone issue is a big issue for both of you. I mean, the idea, because I know lots of companies are doing daily deals, and a lot of people are putting check-ins within their data.
I think that was the nerdiest high five ever, by the way.
Yeah, that was a But you did that in public. I'm a little bit uncomfortable with that.
So, my high fives were cooler when I had longer hair.
Yeah. I do appreciate you have to answer the way you did. But you talk about online commerce and offline, putting them together. I mean, I do that with Fandango right now, right? If I want to buy an offline movie ticket, I buy it online to save the lines. The real question I have is, how do you keep the merchants and the consumers, rather, from being addicted? So I'll only go to the merchants that have the sales. And does that ultimately lead to the merchants raising prices so that the 50% discount looks good?
We track things like repeat purchases pretty closely, and merchants are quite happy with the results. They find that the customers that come in through Groupon come back in at a rate that's similar to the rate that normal customers come back. And I think part of it is how we position Groupon as a city guide. We're not necessarily just sending out the same type of deal every day. We expose people to different types of businesses, and then it's the merchant's job to win them over as permanent customers. To some degree, discounting has been part of the product ecosystem for a long, long time. We think it's okay to introduce that to the service ecosystem as well to help create a more efficient market. So I think one way or another, I'm a big believer in discounting being part of the future of local, whether it's us that ultimately succeeds or not.
And also, you presumably be more targeted, getting more targeted.
I think that's a big focus of ours. 2011, I think, is the year that Groupon becomes much more thought of, I think, as a technology company than just this sales and marketing technology hybrid. And a lot of that is going to be personalization.
Because there's a lot of clones of small versions of Groupon. Sort of, there's a mommy one, there's a family one, there's all kinds of ones that aren't you.
Right, that's true.
Yeah. I mean, because although Target... He hates clones. But because targeting also has its issues in terms of what I might like on Foursquare and things like that. And it's still sort of in its nascent stage. And I always say, whenever I go on Facebook, the only ads I get are for gay cruises. And I hate ships. And I just don't want to go on a gay cruise. But go ahead.
Yeah, my question related to Chicago company, your company. Are you guys getting a lot of pressure to move to Silicon Valley? Or are you fine where you are? And is that a good thing for the rest of us who are not in Silicon Valley?
Yeah, the question for us was why would you ever start a company in New York and not Silicon Valley? And it's we didn't want to. We live in New York. We can start companies in New York. And there's really no pressure to move out there. We did open up we opened up an engineering office in San Francisco just so we can hire some of the folks that don't feel like moving over to New York. But we've been doing great hiring really great candidates out of New York.
I'd agree. I'd say the same thing, and plus we have so many salespeople. But we also have an office in Palo Alto for engineers. And
you do work the Midwest thing. The Osh. You do. It's nice to have a different company. They do. It's a differentiator for you, I think, in a lot of ways. Correct?
Oh shucks.
Okay. He does. I got to tell you, it works. Unfortunately. Go ahead. Over here first, or over here? Marcel, calm down. What? Okay, first here, Esther, and then here.
So this is kind of a reprise of the previous question. You said very intelligently the market is going to become more efficient. You're helping that to happen. You're helping consumers to benefit from these market efficiencies. So somebody's margin is going to get squeezed. And in your internal financial projections, which I wouldn't want to ask about, where do you think that's going to happen? Is it you or the vendors, or are the consumers really not going to get the benefit?
Someone getting squeezed?
The margin's getting squeezed. As you do discounting, someone doesn't get the money they were hoping to get.
Well, I mean, there's so much unsold inventory for all these local businesses. I don't think it's a zero-sum game, if I understand the question correctly. I think part of what we're trying to do is just fill up. So when you walk down Main Street, you're not seeing 80% of the businesses 20% full. And if we can find a way to do that, I think everybody wins.
Restaurants and spas have a notoriously low fill rate, and so sorry, Esther.
And so if those restaurants and spas become more profitable and more efficient, they no longer need to charge such high prices.
That's right. Or they charge higher prices when they're busy, lower prices when they're less busy, supply and demand.
But there's less price to get the margin off. Never mind.
I think the issue is that if you get people too addicted to discounting, they are addicted to discounting. I think that's, I'd
go back to what I said about product discounting. Like, yes, people are already addicted. Discounting is part of buying stuff.
Right. Stacy.
Hi, Stacy Kramer from Paid Content.
Wait.
Stacy Kramer from Paid Content, and I'm curious for both of you, especially Andrew. A lot of newspapers, a lot of other publications are trying to work with Groupon. They're trying to make deals work for them. They're trying to do their own thing. Why should they work with Groupon? Why should they work with Foursquare? And what can you do for them?
What can you do for newspapers whose business you are stealing?
For newspapers or for merchants? For newspapers specifically?
You have several deals in New York with the...
Yeah, we've done a lot of stuff with publishing companies, like everyone from the Times to New York Magazine and some of these other folks. And we're trying to create a channel that allows them to build things build things online that encourage people to go experience the real world. That's like the whole Foursquare idea. It's like how can New York Magazine put together a guide of the best burgers in all of Manhattan, encourage people to go do that, and then get credit for driving people to those businesses. And so that's one of the questions that we look at trying to answer, and I think we're doing that okay.
And Andrew, you're actually partnering with newspapers to offer deals with them. And I've noticed some newspapers are trying to do this on their own or with other companies. Why should they go with Groupon versus someone else or doing it themselves?
From what we've seen, the companies that have tried to do their own Groupon clones have had trouble getting high-quality businesses. A lot of times they're beholden to their existing advertisers rather than necessarily what the consumer wants. Groupon, as easy it is to clone, there's clearly no question about that. It's quite difficult to execute. So many of the newspapers and other types of businesses that have tried to do the Groupon thing while they have another business that they're also trying to run have later come to us and with an interest in partnering. There's just a lot of, from getting right businesses to customer service to the technology platform, etc. There's a lot to be gained by partnering with us.
I don't think we have time for. Do we have enough time for another question or not?
Very last one.
One question, and then I have one tiny. You pick. Okay.
Pardon? Try to build it in one question.
Okay. I have a question to discounts. For example, in Germany.
Introduce yourself, Dr.
Pardon?
Who are you?
Who are you?
Dirk Ippen, local newspaper publisher in Germany. And coming to discounts, in Germany, local commerce is very, very competitive and prices are quite low. So the discount idea is the margins are low for the commerce, and the discount idea in Germany is much more difficult than in the United States, for example, because our clients are struggling and the discount is already in the prices, and therefore my question is, do you see differences in your international expansion between United States, Germany, or other countries, or is it all the same?
I think he's asking if there are differences in how discounting is done in different places because it's more competitive here, much more competitive. Prices are lower here. They can't take your relentless discounting, presumably.
I think there's some difference from country to country based on the local cultures, but we do closely monitor the merchant satisfaction and ensure that they're getting an ROI from working with Groupon. So I mean, we wouldn't be able to continue to sign up businesses if they weren't making money somehow on it.
Right. Okay, I'm going to ask the very last question. If you weren't doing what you're doing right now, say, for example, you being a corporate douchebag, what would you be doing? What would be the thing that you would be interested in the internet space or whatever? Very briefly. Dennis, start.
Professional athlete, maybe? No.
Okay.
I'm actually kind of obsessed with like the idea of social TV right now. And,
social TV.
Yeah, and just making uses of screens that aren't on all the time, and what can you do with that? Like using it as a display to do other interesting things with your life. So.
Okay, interesting. Andrew?
So I have one website idea that I think is way more important than what I'm doing now, that I'd love to do at some point. And I'm going to see if I can get someone else to do it. So if any like awesome entrepreneurs want to take my idea, then we should talk. But other than that, I had two ideas.
Which you're not going to share with us because you're such a discreet man.
Well, no, I don't want to. But I will show you my other ideas I had in like the last 2 weeks, and I'm going to see if I can do these too. So one is I want to record like an adult kids album, like an adult album for kids, like the kind of album that kids would think adult music is like people singing songs about like I can stay up all night and stuff like that. Okay. So that you could like be a parent and be like, I'm going to leave this in the CD player, don't you listen to that, and then they listen to it. And,
okay. All right.
So that was one idea. And then the other one, and this is great, and I really do want that one's stupid, but this one somebody should go do. So I'm having a bachelor party.
Guy here can make that happen. He can have Madonna involved, but go ahead.
Yeah. I'm having a bachelor party at some point in the next 6 months because I'm getting married later this year. And what I thought I wanted to do, like once at a certain point you need to find new kinds of thrills, and especially if you've had a lot of success, and it's like, the most dangerous game. The ultimate thrill is killing things.
Okay.
So, but there's not many opportunities to do that.
No.
So, what I was thinking would be cool.
God, the cynicism has happened fast for you. But go ahead. Yeah.
Imagine you go to Las Vegas.
Okay.
You go to a casino, and you're with like 4 of your friends, and you start playing cards, and then there's someone at your table, and he's like sweating, and he's sick. And it's like, what's wrong with that guy? And he goes, excuse me. And then he goes to the bathroom, and he's gone for like 10 minutes. And then he comes out, a zombie. And he like bites somebody else. And then somebody else is like, hey guys, over here. And then you and your friends go into another room. And there's like paintball guns. And then you spend the next 2 hours shooting your way out of this casino, killing all the zombies. And then the coup de grace is at the end. When you make it out, there's like 100 zombies right behind you. It's like a Tony and Tina's wedding kind of thing.
Okay.
And there's like 100 zombies behind you, and there's a military chopper, and they're like, come on, guys, get on. And you get on, and as you're flying away, there's like a paintball Gatling gun, and you shoot all the zombies down.
I think that's the plot of Hangover 2, but very nice. And on that note, Andrew, Dennis.
So I think that could be the next movie after the Social Network.
It's actually the plot of Hangover 2. Anyway, thanks a lot, you guys. And again...
Thank you.